Why can't we make our lives kind?
Yeah.
Like it's kind for me to give myself Wednesdays off, to go and do the appointments because I don't
Mm,
have the bandwidth or the stamina to, do running around in the evenings after I've been on the computer for
yeah.
8.5 hours during the day. So Wednesdays is my catch up day. That's the day I go and see my osteopath and I, have my appointments and stuff. So like it's kind.
Yeah.
And why not? Like why not make our lives kind, right? Like we are in control and
Hmm.
we deserve it.
When you go beyond the surface and into the depths of who you truly are, you will rise. For those that maybe didn't catch it, like one of the focus of our last conversation was navigating grief, and you sharing a big piece of your journey of losing your daughter, and this conversation is going to be a little bit different, and not so maybe so focused on grief, but I feel like probably
Yeah.
naturally it might come into the conversation. I feel like in the work that you do, and with grief, and even just navigating transitions, what was the question that I was kind of thinking that we could start with is, I think a natural response is resistance, like some form of resistance when we are experiencing grief, we're experiencing some sort of transition. And I'm just curious what, creating that path of least resistance, what does that kind of look like for you, and how have you been able to kind of embrace that in your period of life of where you are right now too?
Yeah, sure. Well, I always said when I was working with my grief clients that that's where the pain lives, is in the resistance. So once I leaned into my grief, I was able to actually feel it, experience it, and move through it. So it's the same with transitions. And, as I've said in the past, like grief is not just about death, it's all our experiences in life. And I had a concussion back in 2017 and I transitioned back into the workplace. And after a year, the neurologist said that your brain is as good as it's going to get now. And I remember being mortified at that and, just going back to work and pushing through and, be sitting in that pain, the pain of the, not being myself and not being able to do the things I could do, not having the same stamina, and it was in that resistance that that pain lived. And I muscled through and, because that's what I do. But after a year and a half, I hit a wall again.
Mm,
And then I was off work for a year and 5 months because I had completely depleted my brain capacity, my vision capacity, because vision is not just your sight and what you see, it's interpreting what you see and then your brain processing what you do with what you see, plus your peripheral and your spatial recognition of
right.
where you are. Things like getting in the car and driving somewhere, but then forgetting how to get there.
Mm,
There's neurons in your brain that like connect to that stuff, and having to like stop and think about, okay, where am I and where do I need to get to, and then like mapping that out in my brain where you would just typically get in the car
naturally.
and just go, like, right? So that process really was about having to embrace the 2.0 version of myself, because the more I resisted, the more painful it was, the more angst I had, the more irritable I was, and like it's just not a sustainable way to live. So I really had to embrace that. And it's a process and it's a practice, but now it's my best friend.
I love that. And I think that's I completely agree in the sense that it's in that resistance, and the I kind of look at it as avoidance, I guess. Maybe that's just how it's kind
Hmm.
of played out a lot in my own life, and that might just be like a very natural habitual way that I go about it is the avoidance of things. And in that is where so much fear gets created. And it's all
Oh
this
yeah.
unknown that is creating all the fear. And yet, I have found that when I do the thing that I'm avoiding and resisting so heavily, is
Hmm.
ends up just being so much easier. And you're like, wow, it really wasn't that big of a deal. So it's just interesting how we create these big things and we create more pain for ourselves. And I think that's what I thought
Yes.
about when you were saying that is in that experiencing of the resistance, or when we're doing that and when we're creating that, that's where we are experiencing and creating more discomfort for our own selves. And the
Yeah.
beautiful thing is
Yeah.
that we're controlling that, and then we can also control not having that pain.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're making decisions for ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
And that's the bad news because we can make decisions that stop us and that, cause all this fear. But you're right. The good news is we can actually create different decisions too. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's so very true. And when you were talking, it's like, yeah, I can find myself in that too, avoiding something. And then it just builds and builds and builds. And, it usually is coming from a place of unknown or uncertainty that you don't know if you can handle it. And then you do it. And it's like, wow, why did I make such a big deal of that?
Yeah,
So true. Oh yeah, I can
exactly.
find myself in that many times.
Yeah. And I think too, when sometimes I feel like we have kind of maybe like misconceptions of when we're, taking this path of least resistance. Maybe it kind of equates to us thinking like, we're taking like the easy way, or, we're just creating like this idea around even just bringing more ease into our lives. And I know this is something that you were kind of
Mm,
sharing with me of just behind the scenes you're kind of taking a step back of just I maybe it's not necessarily taking a step back from your business, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like maybe it's kind of like the forcing of just actively putting yourself out there, and obviously you can speak to that, but this idea of ease almost sometimes can feel for a lot of us, especially entrepreneurs, when we have these periods, because ultimately at the end of the day, what I've been learning so much is just how everything is all cyclical, and we're always going to have these seasons in our lives, and for us, especially as entrepreneurs, creatives, we're going to have these seasons where it's going to feel like the winter, like you're kind of in that space. It's meant to be reflective, it's meant to kind of be a step back, and then you start to kind of come out. And so I feel like sometimes it's really hard for some of us to take a step back or to bring more ease, because it feels like we're giving up for some reason in our brain. And I'm just
yeah.
curious, like, how have you differentiated this like piece around like surrendering to the flow and avoiding that like discomfort in it?
Oh my gosh, there's a whole world in there that you just captured. I was like, yeah, and
Oh,
this and this and this and this. So first of all, yeah, when what the first thought I had was, when I went back to work and I wasn't being able to handle it, and then it's like that attacks your confidence and your self-esteem,
yeah.
and then they were talking about putting me back on disability. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've worked so hard to get back to the workplace. I don't want to go back on disability. It just felt like such a step back. And actually, it was my boss that said, well, because my vision therapist wanted me to cut 2 hours off of every day. And they said, well, if you can't work 7.5 hours a day, then you have a disability. And my boss said, what if you took Wednesdays off and you split up your week? So you were only in front of the computer for 2 days, and then you were off on Wednesday, and then, you were away from the screens and then back for 2 more days. And that just felt manageable.
Mm,
And yet there was a part of me that was like, oh, I'm not being able to work 5 days a week. And, there was a bit of a hit on your self-confidence and stuff, but like, again, like easing into that and accepting where your limitations are. And that's the step back. That was one of the step backs I had to do. It's like, wow, like, can I actually do my job 4 days a week and still feel like a contribution, still feel like I'm on the team and an active player. And so, yeah, and then I had to come to that realization that it's like, this is where I'm at, and accepting that. And then also accepting the support from my boss too,
yeah.
because it's like, no, I can do it. So, that was one of the step backs that I thought of. And then with regards to business, yeah, it's like you can be like in the grind, and doing all the marketing and doing all the things, and yeah, in December, my mom got sick and ended up in the hospital Christmas Eve, and she was in the hospital for 6 weeks, and so it really like it just brought up, like, it just makes you stop. It makes you pause And again, I just thought, you know what? I need to take a step back. I need to, take care of me. Number one, if I'm going to be 24-hour caregiver, then I need to put my oxygen mask on first, right? And I just thought, wow, like I can't give all of me serving and take care of me and take care of my mom. And it's like something has to give. So yeah, you're right. Like I took a step back, but it was interesting. I actually, in my mind, I thought I'm going to take 6 months and I'm
Mm,
just going to step back and I'm just going to, organically see what shows up. Well, it was about a month because in that stillness and in that quiet of stepping back, you know what? God, the universe, source just showed up and started pointing me in the direction. And it's just been a beautiful, beautiful transition for me back into my business, feeling so aligned and lit up and excited because back in December, I was like feeling burned out.
yeah.
And so that was the reason for stepping back. And I'm so grateful for that month of just stillness and quiet and just reflections.
Yeah.
It's powerful and but yeah, I mean, I was nervous. I was
Of
nervous to tell
course.
people about it,
Of
right? Because
course.
it's like, am I failing? Am I
Yeah.
giving up? And yeah, so I had like a few different conversations with people. And of course, they were supportive,
Yeah.
but it was me I had to deal with,
And that's
you know?
our usually our biggest thing that we have to hurdle because I remember
Yeah.
a dear friend of mine too. She's one that she's also had just like health challenges, and there would be days where just surprise out of nowhere she would be in so much pain, and I always deeply respected how honest she was, and I'm sure even internally it wasn't so, like, to me, receiving it, it's like, wow, she deeply honors her body and respects herself. And it feels unapologetic. But I'm sure for us, as we're doing it, it does not feel that way. And it feels we have
Yeah.
to go through all these like mental hurdles and jumps and loops and spirals of I'm letting this person down and what is this person going to think? And we create all these scenarios so much bigger
Hmm.
than what they actually are.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally have struggled with that over the years too. And, now I feel like I'm unapologetic,
Hmm.
but it has been a practice. It has definitely been a practice to be able to set boundaries and to listen to my body, to listen to my brain. Like
Yeah.
I just posted something on social media about listen to your brain, huh? Like I'm used to listening to my gut, I
Mhm.
listen to my heart, but it's like, what do you mean listen to your brain? But when I was going through my vision therapy, I had to check in several times a day because I had to learn where that line was
Yeah.
between stretching myself to do more and be able to handle more, but not stepping over that line and ending up with a migraine and end up in bed for 3 days.
Yeah.
So it was a total like juggling match there to learn where that line was. And so I had to learn where I was before I got to the line. So
Yeah.
where I was still feeling okay, where it seems like if you have a migraine, people are sympathetic and, oh, you're okay, you can go to bed. But to look like you're fine, but you're getting close to the line and say no, they're like, why? Why not? Like you're
Mm.
fine. But I know where that line is now. So being able to take care of me and put me first. There's still some times that, I have that mental juggle with myself, but for the most part I've learned because I'm the one that suffers if I
That's
don't. Like
exactly
I'm
it.
the one I'm the one left in bed for 3 days. You're carrying on. It's like,
Yeah.
no,
I don't wanna be in
nobody's coming
bed.
to save me.
Yeah. I don't wanna be in bed
Yeah.
for 3 days suffering
Yeah.
and feeling like this, you know? That's such
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
interesting like, are you able to maybe try and speak to because I feel like that's a beautiful I know for you, it's obviously with your migraines and that threshold, but I feel like for a lot of us, maybe it's that period of, like, burnout, right? And I feel like
Yes.
it's this like how do yeah what's the question that I'm trying to bring forth is maybe speaking to like how are you able to pinpoint this is my line and I'm not going
Mm.
to cross that because I want to take care of me first.
Yeah, well, it was a practice because I failed lots of times that I ended up in bed.
Hmm.
So it's almost, you have to fail. You have to
Yep.
fail forward. You have to, but then be paying attention to the lesson, like whether it's your anxiety raises or your depression gets worse or, whatever your kind of angst that you reach in those times or, total exhaustion. Or for me, if I get too many things on my plate and I feel like I'm like just overextended,
Hmm.
then I get kind of my back up and I feel this resentment
Mm,
kind of seeping in. So when I feel that
yeah.
in my body, it's like, ooh, I've got too much. I got to like take a few things off my plate. So it's really about self awareness and it's about learning like what your little symptoms are. Like, like, I notice if I get stressed at work, like I stop breathing.
Mm,
Like I notice that it's like I'm holding my breath or I'm noticing my shoulders are up, when I'm typing. So it's like, oh, shoulders down. Like it's listening to your body. If if you're anxious, then, maybe your breathing starts to be up here rather than in your diaphragm.
hmm.
It could be so many different things,
So,
but it's probably different for everybody. So it's just about learning what those little signs are and then listening to them.
yeah,
And then, because that's the line. And usually, when you are in that place, you've crossed over the line, right? So,
exactly.
so it's just seeing yourself hit that line over and over and over again that will show you where your line is.
Yeah. And
And
what
it's
you
going to be
could
different for everybody.
exactly. And also that's such a it's
Yeah.
a I think the way that you said it too, what I'm equating this to and my own thing is just I put so much on my plate and then I get overwhelmed. And
Yeah.
then my
Yeah.
and then my timelines are just like I'm not able to be anything because I'm trying to do it all at once.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I've done that way too many times, way too many times.
Yeah.
But
And
recently,
you know what's so ironic
yeah,
about that is that I'm in control of my day timer. It's like I get resentment. It's like, hello, who put all these things in your calendar? It's not like other people are putting them in. I did
exactly.
it to myself. Yeah.
Exactly. But that's one of the things too. And I've recognized this pattern of over and over again of like, trying to do it all at once and then meeting that like wall of overwhelm. And I'm just, I'm proud of myself most recently. I was kind of looking at, and I was like, I'm not going to feel good about, I was wanted to host this master class and I was like, I'm not going to feel good about doing it this day when I have so much more to do. And so I just pushed it to a week later. And immediately I was like, huh, I feel relieved. So it's just these like little micro shifts that we can give ourselves. And guess what? The only persons that's going to know that is you. Nobody else
Yeah.
knows. You know,
Yeah.
nobody else is going to care
Yeah.
either. Like, I don't mean that in a bad way, but nobody else is going to care if you do that
Yeah.
for yourself. So it's just, I so relate to that failing forward. And I think sometimes we have to almost see in a sense, like the patterns and that are coming up that are not working for us, that are putting us in this cycle of experiencing whatever that is, right? Whatever that thing is for us, overwhelm, whatever that is. We kind of have to see it so many times so that we can be like, wait a second. Now I can recognize this. Now I
Yes.
know and I can do differently. And that's the most beautiful thing when
Yes.
you have this power of awareness. When you bring awareness to your life, it's like, I know I can do differently here. I know I can do differently.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I really love that.
Yeah.
I'm curious too. So, I mean, talking about like burnout and even loss and just like major shifts and transitions, especially for those that are in that state of transition. And I feel like oftentimes what we try to do is rush. It's so interesting. I wanted to go back because I was thinking about this before when you said you were going to give yourself 6 months and then a month later of stillness. It's like you're ready, and it's we can't predict how long that time frame is going to be. It's
Yeah.
we know when we need to slow down or take a step back or whatever that looks like for you in your life. And the time frame of coming back, of blooming, if you want to look at it in seasons, at that period of that winter season when you're going kind of inward and you're probably experiencing more stillness and slowness and quiet, we can't predict how long it's going to be. And I think that's such a beautiful example
Mm.
of I'm going to give myself 6 months, and nope, 1 month. But oftentimes we try and rush the process. And so I'm curious in those periods too, how can we kind of just give ourselves that space to honor whatever that time frame has to be, needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm not even an expert at that because what came to mind was when I went back to work. I went back too soon. And I knew that, but it was financial. It's like I had been off with 35% of my income
Right.
and I needed to have income coming in. So in that instance, I rushed it,
Yeah,
so I can find myself in the rush
me too.
for because of circumstances. But also then, yeah, fast forward and I was actually willing to give myself 6 months. So that's growth in my mind, like that's again self-awareness, that's grace, that's understanding that you have limitations. That's me recognizing that there is a 2.0 version of me now,
Hmm.
where it was probably still glimpses of 1.0 back when I went back to work,
Yeah.
right? But in that transition, I learned, I stumbled, I failed forward. It's like, yeah, the first year I had to deal with myself. My ego was in the tank, because I was used to being on and, a mover and a shaker. And I mean, I could barely get through a meeting,
Yeah.
and I had so much support. I was so lucky. But yeah, you just think again, it's learning to give ourselves grace and being in the failure and learning from those failures.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things too, at least for me, just to kind of add on to everything that you're saying as well, because I very much have experienced those moments of knowing that I'm in a period of that stillness and that just creating that space of inwardness and trying to like force my way to be like, I'm ready. And it's like, hold on a second, you're not ready. It's not quite time yet. And that's just like
Yeah,
the impatient side of me. And I think
yeah.
the challenge becomes too is when you start like even just creating comparison too, and I feel like that's not necessarily that everyone experiences that, but for me that's been one of the things is recognizing that you start to like just see all social media, right? You start to see what everyone else is doing, and I'm just naturally absorbing inspiration. I'm like, ooh, this. And I'm like, ooh,
Mm,
yes, run. And
right.
just allowing ourselves to really just sit and marinate and to just not rush these moments, these periods of time in our life when we're being called to just create that slowness there, because there's so much in each kind of like season that we experience in the winter.
Mhm.
Although
Mhm.
you probably don't like winter, if for us Canadians, like we all the snow that we've gotten recently. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like spiritual inward season, let's call it that, not
Yeah.
the physical
Yeah.
coldness. But those
Yeah.
period, there's so much to be learned in all these seasons,
Yes.
and I think what's difficult is that we have been wired, wired, especially like maybe like a North American thing, but wired to just go and be on and the hustle and the grind, and there's space for that. There's a period of time for that. And also
Mhm.
the period of time for rest and to nourish ourselves. Because if we're constantly
Yeah.
pouring out, pouring out, pouring out, when is the cup's going to be empty? When
Yeah.
does the cup get filled up again? You know?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. I love this.
I have a love-hate relationship with winter
Mm-hmm.
as you're speaking about it because
Me too.
it does seem like more effort, the driving takes a little more, the clothes are a little more, but at the same time, yeah, there is that comfort, like the
Mm,
fireplace and the slippers and and the hot drinks and so it's like being able to embrace what's uncomfortable too, right?
yeah.
Like the yin and the yang. Yeah.
I've never, I don't know why that kind of like hit me differently, just hearing of like the comfort, because that's so true. And I think we
Yeah.
often just have we equate the winter, and it's, we experience more, I guess, depression or sadness and those winter
Mm,
blues. And yes, there is a lot of discomfort in that, but there's also a lot of comfort. And I don't
yeah.
know why that,
Homemade soup. Homemade
right?
soup.
Yeah, there's just, oh my God, you just completely shifted. I don't know why. That just, I needed to,
Yeah.
clearly, I needed to receive that today.
Yeah. Yeah. Clearly.
Yeah, and I think that just reminds me of, I was thinking about this earlier when we kind of started, but it just, it's all perspective, you know, and we are in control of that. We can always shift our perspective, and it's when we're looking at it from, not to like for lack of better words, like a negative perspective, that's when it becomes hard. That's when we experience
Yeah.
the resistance, and that's when we experience the
Yes.
pain, is when we
Yep.
have just this negative outlook on what we're experiencing. But even just the simple shift of, wow, I get to receive so much comfort in the winter. Like I get to just cozy up. Like that, even just that creates this little shift of just like, oh, I gotta put on this, and I gotta do this, and I gotta do this.
Boots and the scarf and the hat.
Right? And even just the idea of just like, for me, I'm very much a homebody. I love my home. And so winter is
Yeah.
just this perfect opportunity to be able to experience more of that home time. And so again, everything is just this beautiful shift in perspective, and we're in control of that. We're always in control of the perspective that we have on the situation, on what we're experiencing. And I think
Yes.
we create more of that like that path of least resistance when we shift our perspective on things.
Yeah, absolutely. I've recently created a 6-month program for professional women transitioning back into the workplace
Mhm.
after an injury, an illness, or a loss. And one of the big focuses is a mindset shift, because that is, like you say, such a big part of it. Such a big part of it. Like at first, it was like, gosh, taking Wednesdays off, what are people going to think?
Mhm.
Blah blah blah. But it's like then celebrating that I actually do the same amount of work as everybody else and I get it accomplished in 4 days.
Yeah.
Like, yay me.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's been so many mindset shifts around that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that like for me, what I was thinking, even just the shift, it's like I get a break in the middle of the week. That that's amazing. Like,
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
used to
Yeah.
with my job, when I used to work weekends and majority of the weekends, I loved splitting up my days off, and I would be off Mondays and Fridays. And I loved that because it was like 2 days and then a day, a break, and then 3 days and then a break. I loved it. I was in love. And working five
Yeah.
days in a week was hard. If I had to work 5 days in a row, I'm like, oh God, I can already feel myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll
And
just,
you know what? Why can't we make our lives kind?
yeah,
Like it's kind for me to give myself Wednesdays off, to go and do the appointments because I don't have the bandwidth or the stamina to, do running around in the evenings after I've been on the computer for
yeah,
8.5 hours during the day. So Wednesdays is my catch up day. That's the day I go and see my osteopath and I, have my appointments and stuff. So like it's kind.
yeah.
And why not? Like, why not make our lives kind, right? Like we are in control and
Hmm.
we deserve it. And yeah, it's kind to us
Yeah, I really
and we
love
get
that.
to create it.
I really love
Yeah.
that. Just making our days and everything just more kind to ourselves. I feel like that's
Mhm.
so, like, such a beautiful way to put that.
Mm.
Being able to create that space for ourselves is so kind for ourselves. And how can we be more kind to ourselves? I feel like is a beautiful question to really sit with every single day as a check-in.
Yeah.
How can I be more kind to myself today? Because we are our own worst critic. I know it's so like cliche, but we're so hard on ourselves. And, if we just look at ourselves as if, our best friend, how can we be more kind? And I
Yeah.
think we can create um, just a lot more for ourselves when we create that kindness, and we bring that more into it. I'm curious too, in this kind of like space that you've experienced, or even just that, I know you said that you were gonna, take 6 months. It ended up being like a month, but I'm kind of curious, like, is there anything that you learned about yourself or just in general, of even just like the act of saying, I'm gonna take 6 months off, and then it being a month? Like, What is like one of the biggest things that you learned in all of that?
Just the allowing, like being proud of myself. Like, although the conversations at first were difficult and I was like kind of embarrassed and wondering what, not what they would think. I know I'm surrounded with a supportive community, but how I would feel about that.
Yeah.
Like, am I like giving up? Am I like, is this something I'm not going to do? Like, will I return to this after 6 months? Like that unknown. It's like, wow, if I take 6 months off, maybe I'm not even going to do this anymore.
Yeah.
So, like, there was this kind of angst around the unknown and what this is actually going to mean for me. But then once I had had the conversations with the people that I wanted to have the conversations with, I just felt this lift.
Mhm.
Like, I just felt like an ease and a relief. And I was no longer worried about what was going to happen in 6 months. I just was in it.
Mm.
And I was just like going to be with it.
Yeah.
And yet, and my heart felt open too. Like
Mm.
I don't know that I noticed that my heart had closed up,
Yeah.
but I think it had. And when I, put a pin in it, it's like my heart's open now and I was open to receive and I was just yeah, it was just a yes to me, I
Mm.
think, instead of being a yes to all the other things. And that just felt like a warm hug.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then just being with that for the month, it just felt right. And when you're paying attention to when you're in alignment with yourself, things just feel good. When you're in overwhelm or you're having anxiety, you're not in alignment because there's no way you would be experiencing those things if you were in alignment. So for that month I just knew that I was in alignment.
Mm.
And that was enough for me. It's like I don't have to figure this out. I'm just being with me and I'm in alignment.
Yeah.
And so that's really what it was like. And then because my heart was open and I am a yes to life. I mean, I am I'm known to be a yes.
Yeah.
So, but coming from a place of heart open and being with it all, the right things and the right people came in because I mean, I think I was on like 20 podcasts last year.
Yeah.
And the girl that was booking me on podcasts, I said, no more, no more. Like, I'm not doing that. And, when she understood, it was like, okay, we'll just take a break. Like, I had to have the conversation with her. And then I got your email and your invitation to come back on the podcast. And so I read it. And at first it was like, oh no, I'm not doing podcasts. And I read your email and, the topics that you were exploring, and it just spoke to me. And I thought, I'll do this podcast. Like, but coming from a place of choice and not like, oh, another
Yes.
podcast, like it just felt aligned.
Yeah.
It just felt aligned. And having that knowing is like that is just where I wanted to live in that knowing, not just booking, 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 booking,
Yeah.
So that was a beautiful example of how my heart was open and I'm a yes. And when the right thing comes in, then you can embrace it and it just feels right and you're in alignment.
Yeah.
Just keeping myself in alignment. That's my focus this year.
Yeah. And it's becomes less forceful. And I think that's the thing,
Mhm.
right? You said something just so key and you kept saying it, just like this openness and the receiving. And
Mm.
that's so key in these periods, in these transition periods, whatever that looks like. It could simply just be a transition of just, I guess, in a way for you, it's like being so on and maybe this season of like grind and then just transitioning into a season of winter. Like we all experience that. We're all experiencing this transition of, if you look at the season, if you believe in this cyclical piece of it, there's always this transition period and it's difficult. It's hard. It's not always so
Mhm.
easy to just navigate that, but the piece that you just, the openness and the receiving just like really struck, and it's just so true. And that's where we let go in the falling and the crumbling of just like this force. And it's
Yes.
when you kind of step back, I feel like when most of us start to experience the receiving of the things that we've been wanting. And when
Yeah.
we're constantly forcing, and I think we get stuck in, well, why is it not happening? Why am I not experiencing it? Where's the space to
Hmm.
receive what you're asking?
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
when you're asking for the clarity, when you're asking for the inspiration. But if you're constantly putting yourself on, where's the space for to receive the clarity? It's
Exactly.
I think it doesn't always have to be all or nothing, I feel.
Hmm.
And it
Hmm.
becomes this beautiful question of, how can I create space for both, so that I,
Hmm.
not to say that like to avoid experiencing the slowness, because that's going to naturally happen, but so that it
Mm.
doesn't feel like this, like almost like very, what's the word that I'm looking for? Like just, I don't know, just not tragic, but just a moment of kind of like, I guess in a way we experience burnout and then it's like crash. Maybe that's what,
Right.
that period of this big, um, just experiencing like the high of it and then just feeling we have to go into this like crazy low. We
Mm.
don't necessarily have to experience that if we create more of that into our day.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's the practice.
Yes.
It's really about the practice. You can't like, have a full-blown panic attack and then decide to, implement these tools or a mindset shift, because then you're like splat on the floor
Yeah.
already. So it's a bigger climb up the mountain when
Yeah.
you have already crossed that line that we talked about, right? So it is practicing that every day, practicing kindness, practicing space, practicing grace
Yeah.
every day. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm so
Yeah.
grateful. This has just been such a beautiful conversation. I'm so grateful for you. And I'm so grateful that my
Me too.
invitation to come back was just aligned for you. This was so
It
beautiful.
was.
I'm
It
so
was. Yeah.
grateful.
There was no question. Yeah. It was like, oh, I remember we had a lovely conversation. I thought, yeah, this feels right. Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm truly so grateful and honored, and I feel like there was just so much beautiful little pieces of wisdom and insight too for those that are listening. I know even for myself, I just received so much for this, and I'm
Oh,
just so
great.
grateful. So thank you so much, Cheryl, for coming
You're
back.
so welcome. You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you for listening. Make sure to leave a review and continue the conversation with me over on social media. And we'll see you in the next episode.